and also staff members of our sister institutes. It is a very special day, not just because today happens to be International Yoga Day, which we are celebrating, and we have been doing this in the past, but also because this day is a reminder to us that we must not ignore ourselves, our own bodies, our own minds, when we are so busy doing our duty for everybody around us. We always prioritize others. We put our families forward first. We take care of our workplace. We take care of our duties at the workplace. As citizens of society, we pay our taxes. We follow the rules. But when it comes to our self-care, sometimes we ignore that as a priority. We do take care of our bodies and minds. We eat our food every day. We may be doing exercise, pranayam, yogasan, different things. But if I were to ask any of us here, how many of us prioritize ourselves within the top 3 in our list of life? I don't know how many of us would honestly raise their hand and say, yes, I do. And some of us might think that doing so is a little selfish. Okay, Santosh sir has raised his hand. Good to see that. Some of us might mistakenly believe that that is a little selfish. It's actually not selfish. In fact, it is enlightened self-interest that we try and have our priority, our own health, our bodies, our minds, our emotions taken care of when we are trying to move ahead in life. Because when this is sorted, then our roles fall into place, our duties fall into place. Now, the challenge for VESLARC was when we were putting together today's theme, I was wondering, what new can we tell you? How do we make sure what we're telling you today is not just a reminder, it's not just a tick mark? So keeping that in mind, I've put forward certain inputs called fundamental self-care. And here today, that's why we start with the mindset. So although today is International Yoga Day, we are not doing the asanas as we were requested also by our Polytechnic family that everybody is busy with various activities. But we are looking back into our minds to see what is it that stops us from doing our best and how do we address that. So without any further ado, let me start my screen share and let me just take you to a few slides that I'd like to show you. Is this visible? Anushka, is this visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Let me just go to the slideshow mode. So we're talking about fundamental self-care. And usually we associate this with asanas, but today we are seeing more things. What are they? What we have done is tried and structured it into 3 parts. A very tiny part called mindset, tiny but essential because everything begins with a mindset. In Sanskrit, we say ya drishti sa srishti. First, we have the drishti, meaning we visualize something. We want something, we want to achieve something, gain something. Let's say a healthy body or a disease-free body. And then we work towards it. So the base of our effort in any direction is the mindset. The second part is the actual self-care. What are the actual things we should be doing? And lastly, a couple of concluding thoughts. That's also a tiny segment. So when we talk of mindset, very often our thinking is a little casual when it comes to self-care. We may say things like, oh, I would love to meditate, but I don't have time for meditation. Or I would love to learn a lot of good yogasans, and I really admire the way somebody does maybe Vrishtikasana or Chakrasana or whatever, but I don't have the time for it. Or I don't have a good teacher, or I have a pain in my hand or my foot or whatever. If we are to make a move towards wellness, the first thing is commitment. And how do we know we are committed? There's another word beginning with C which comes in, consistency. I haven't put that on the slide, but I'm sure many of us staff members here will be nodding your heads right now because this is what you tell your students as well. Consistency is the key if you want to make progress. Say a student who studies for 8 hours on the night before the exam, whereas a student who does the same 8 hours but spread across 7 days or 8 days. There is a huge difference in the quality. The second student will be performing much better because consistency allows the body and mind to create the systems which enable it to work well. So there is something called muscle memory. Many of us may have heard this term. In fact, that's the reason why people who have learned cycling as children will not forget it later. People who have learned swimming as children will not forget it later. Consistency allows muscle memory to build. Consistency allows the brain's samskaras, the neural networks, to get created. So, how do we know we are committed? By seeing whether we want to be consistent. And yes, it is a struggle. When we try to bring in a good habit, a new habit, it is going to be a struggle because there will be 50 other things demanding our time. And everything will seem important, more important than what we are trying to do. But the question is, are we still going to do what we have promised ourselves is worthwhile? Another mistake that sometimes we make in terms of mindset is when we want to do something good. Let's say you want to learn some yogasans for your back pain. We treat it as a standalone thing, meaning right now I'm not well, I will practice some asanas. The rest of my lifestyle continues in the old manner, and once I'm fine, I can give it up. Whereas if we are again trying to move towards wellness in a long term manner, what I learned for my back pain today should be a part of a changing lifestyle. So maybe going earlier to sleep and then waking up earlier so that my body heals in line with the circadian rhythm, that could be a part of my lifestyle. Making sure that I wear the right shoes when I go out for my walk and I'm not compromising on that. And not only doing the 3 yogasans or 4 yogasans for my back, but making sure my other activities are in line with that. That is what we mean by holistic self care. I'll give you a little example. This is from my own experience. I've been practicing yogasan for a good while. As many of us would know, I've shared with you in the past, I've been doing it for decades. Not too much, but I've been consistent. There was a time when I was plagued with a lot of back pain. And it so happened, it took a friend of mine to point out that I was carrying heavy bags on one side, meaning on one shoulder. And in order to compensate for that, I was tilting, my center of gravity was off, and my spinal alignment was not right. And the moment she told me this, and being a good friend, she actually scolded me. You know, you have good friends when they actually call you out on things which you're doing which are harmful to you. I switched. And since then, my VESLARC team members know backpacks have been my best friend because backpacks allow you to carry the load evenly on both shoulders. Ask me or ask any person who has suffered, and we'll tell you that carrying a load on one shoulder doesn't work. So it doesn't matter if you can do 5 yogasans beautifully for the back. If you're carrying your bag the wrong way, you're going to end up nullifying all the benefits of the yogasan. So yogasan can't be something that is standalone. It has to go hand in hand with some common sense ways, some science-based ways, some maybe doctor or medical advised ways in which we change our lives for the better. Also, another issue is that sometimes we learn something when we are 20, 25, 30, 35, and we keep doing only the same thing for years and years. Now, that is what we mean by stagnant learning. Imagine a little pond of water which has no inlet and no outlet, and it's getting a little smaller and shrinking in the summer. You're going to find that the water in summer becomes very foul in its smell. And that is because you don't have a continuous flow of water. So, in the same way, when it comes to yogasans and wellness, our learning has to be continuous. It doesn't matter what's our level of mastery on an asana. Can we further learn about our body systems? Can we find out how things are interrelated? Can we work with ourselves and experiment with our own bodies and minds to see how, when we change one aspect of our life, other things also change, either for the better or for the worse? Can we draw our own conclusions from these? When our learning is continuous, our mindset is that of growth. And that makes all the difference when it comes to keeping our good habits. So, therefore, if we want this all to be there in our life, we need to make a few reminders on a daily basis to ourselves. What are the reminders? The first is that I'm worthy of care. Usually, we are great caregivers for other people. And I'm saying this because today we are talking to educationists, we're talking to teachers, to professors. Teachers and professors live in a way where it is ingrained in their minds that what we do is noble and it is for others, so we put others first. Yes, what we do is noble, and yes, we need to take care of others, but we start with ourselves. Every morning, we need to remind ourselves we start with ourselves. The second is to junk that excuse, I don't have time. Let's call a spade a spade. If we have not yet prioritized something in our life, let us say, right now for me, this is not a priority. Yogasan is not a priority, or exercise is not a priority, walking is not a priority, meditation is not a priority. Let's be honest. To say that we don't have time is a myth, because everybody has the same 1440 minutes a day. And some of us do manage to take care of ourselves in spite of busy schedules. Some of us don't. When we don't, is it because we are truly so busy, or is it because we have decided to use some parts of our lives as a crutch to avoid things which we know are good but are boring? Rather, we think they're boring, actually, they're not boring. So let's try and switch our statements in the head, and let's begin by saying that I can find the time to practice self care. Let's drop that statement that I'm too busy to do dot dot dot. Whatever is good for me. Let's say I'll find the time. Very important reminder to ourselves. Every day when you're tempted to skip your pranayam, or skip an asana, or skip your meditation, or skip eating healthy food, because you say, right now we are too busy, right now I have to take care of certain admin responsibilities, right now my paperwork is too high, right now we have too many meetings, right now we're dealing with the admission load, etc., etc. One simple reminder that today what I'm putting into myself, my body and mind, that is going to help the future me in being stronger, more capable, faster, more efficient. So when you take that 5 minutes or 10 minutes of time for self-care, you're not losing that time, you're investing that time. And that is a reminder for all of us. In fact, I'm not embarrassed to share that this is something I have to tell myself too. When I sit down for my meditation in the evening, almost in an automatic way, the balance pending to-do list for the day will pop in my head. And I'll be thinking, I need to finish this, I need to do that, I need to send this email, I need to take care of this task. It's amusing to see how our mind can play games with us. The only reminder is what I'm doing now, this nurturing, will help me do those things better. Then that way, we don't feel bad, or we don't feel conflicted, we don't feel guilty. I know women, especially in India, who tend to feel very guilty to take the time out for self care. It almost feels selfish. So, this reminder helps us come out of that. Now, with these two segments, these two slides done for the first segment, we move to the actual self care segment. And I'm going to show you on the next slide a little picture and ask you to reflect on that. The picture is this. This is called the wheel of life. And as you can see, at the center, you have 0. At the circumference, you have 10. And this applies to each of these lines. And what we've done is we have taken different categories. So you have health, you have spiritual growth, inner growth. When we say personal, we're talking of, in Sanskrit, what's called the Antahkarana, the family and friends area, our material success, our relationships with friends, society, giving back to people, etc., our career, our workplace. Now, for most of us, this is going to be a very large chunk of our life. What I'd like everybody to do, either in your mind or on paper, preferably on paper if you have paper and pen with you, please give yourself a score for each of these 6 things. I repeat that. Either in your minds or on paper, preferably on paper, please give yourself a score for each of these 6 things on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being the least and 10 being the highest. This is a self-assessment. So let's take health. If you feel that you have good health, good immunity, you generally enjoy a good body, in the sense you don't have too many issues, you don't keep getting cough, cold, fever, you don't have acidity, indigestion, upset stomachs, etc., you don't have insomnia, your body systems are working fine, you don't have lifestyle disorders, that will be like an 8. If you have good fitness, good stamina, you can go on hikes, walks, etc., that will be like an 8.5 or a 9. If you are a proper athlete and you're in peak condition, that's a 10. Anything less than that will come in the earlier score range. So let's take a few moments. Don't overanalyze. Start with health and then give yourself a score on these. All right, what I'm going to do is just come out of the slideshow mode, and let me just ask, does anybody have a score that's less than 4? You can type a yes in the chat box if you have a score of less than 4 in any of the categories. And no problem if you do. Or if you have a score of 8 and above in any of the categories. Let me just check the chat box. Okay. Santosh sir, I can see that's a very honest assessment you have done. I'm willing to say from what I know of you, sir, you would be scoring higher than 5, I'm sure. Less than 4. Okay, ma'am, that's again a very honest self-assessment you have done. If you have 4 or less than 4 in any category, take care to change that. Preeti ma'am, that's great. If you have 8 and above, that's really fantastic, because that means you are doing justice to that quadrant. And we are seeing different areas of our life, and all of them will not move in the same level of progress. Why are we talking about this? Because very often we tend to overemphasize something at the cost of something else. And we live our lives that way. Years go by, decades go by. And we say, oh, we are doing the right thing. Think of our mothers and grandmothers who routinely sacrifice their meals, who would have their breakfast late, who would often have their lunch very late and dinners late. I know of families where women will eat the leftovers if there are leftovers. Today, thankfully, with some amount of urban prosperity that has reduced, but before that used to be the case. And then think that that is completely fine. We need to know that life may demand certain things from us, but that doesn't mean that is ideal. If we tell ourselves that is ideal, we'll never be able to correct it towards what is actually ideal. So that is a reason for putting all these little 6 segments in front of you all today, just to remind that all of them are important. Material success is also important. Who says it's not important? For householders, it is important. But yes, does greed define us? No, which is why relationships, serving society is important. But is that the be all end all? No, spirituality is important, which is why that is also there. So this is the reason why that wheel of life can be very, very helpful for us, because it allows us to be honest towards ourselves and figure out what is it that I'm missing and what is it that I need to do. And there's no harm, there's no shame, no embarrassment in saying, look, I'm not scoring well, maybe on health, or maybe when it comes to my family, and I need to do better. So don't worry, I'm not going to ask you all for more scores, but you know what your scores are. And ideally, if you join the dots on the wheel of life, if you draw this on a sheet of paper, you need to have a circle rather than a skewed figure where on one area you're scoring 4 and somewhere else you're doing 8, then it will not be a proper circle. So we need to try and expand that circle. I think somebody is unmuted. Would request if you could please mute. Anushka, would just request you to take care. All right, so I just go back to the screen share and let me take you to the next segment. Here we are talking of wellness hacks. Now, this is the part that many of us will remember, that in VESLARC sessions, we have talked about belly breathing, we have talked of mindfulness. Let's again redefine it to keep it simple. Each day that you're busy, even right now as you're sitting, each one of us is seated in a different location. Check your body, scan your posture. Are you holding any tension somewhere? Is your stomach loose and unclenched, or is it clenched? Are you sitting straight or are you slumped? Are you frowning or are you having a neutral expression or maybe a slightly smiling expression? Are your fingers and hands clenched or are they unclenched? Are you leaning on one side or are you evenly balanced? When you speak, are you there with the words, or is your mouth talking on autopilot with the brain supplying inputs on autopilot, whereas part of your mind has gone off to something else? Mindfulness is nothing but being integrated. our senses being integrated in one unit. We paying attention at that moment as to what we're doing. I was having a conversation on mindfulness recently with somebody who tends to get a little distracted. And I suggested to him, move in the same alignment. He is a person whose mind moves ahead much faster, whereas with his hands, he may be doing a task. So he ends up making mistakes with the tasks because at some point the brain is no longer with the task, it has gone on to think. Simple as bringing it back to what you're doing. Belly breathing. We have talked about this many times in the past. But right now, don't worry, I will not ask you all to do the exercise because I know you all have been in the middle of work. People are probably, they've just had their breakfast some time back. But if you're aware of belly breathing and don't do it on a regular basis, be aware you're denying yourself something wonderful. So please don't deny yourself that. Get back to the habit of belly breathing. As babies, we all learned how to inflate our bellies when we inhale, because the diaphragm pushes the stomach out. Whereas as adults, we do mostly what is called chest breathing or shoulder breathing, and we have forgotten how to do belly breathing. So what should we do to change that, to reverse that? Practice thrice a day. Once in the morning, after pranayam. I'm assuming most of us are doing our pranayam. Once, maybe right before lunchtime. Let's say you've carried your dabba to college for food, and before you sit down and have your lunch, or before you start eating maybe in the staff room or canteen or wherever you're going to have your meal, take just 10 seconds, just 10 seconds. Breathe in and breathe out beautifully, slowly, in a relaxed way. You're going to find that whatever was holding you back through the morning is now unclenched. You're going to be more relaxed. If there was adrenaline and cortisol in the blood in an excessive way, that is going to come back to normal. Your BP, if it was high, will come down by a few points. And therefore now your digestive juices will do their work better. So this is the second time of the day when you can try and do belly breathing. The third time is right before we go to sleep. Extremely useful, especially if some of us suffer from insomnia. In fact, if you know anyone in your family who has chronic insomnia, I'll suggest a technique which is called box breathing. Some of us may be aware. Just like a box, a square box has got equal sides. In box breathing, we do 3 seconds, let's say inhale, 3 seconds holding it, 3 seconds exhale, 3 seconds stay empty without inhaling. So 3, 3, 3, 3, that's a box. Or if we have better lung capacity, 4, 4, 4, 4. All of these happen to be centering techniques. Belly breathing helps you center. Now, what do we mean by center? Usually, and unfortunately, many of us are frazzled in our minds. We find ourselves forgetting things. We find our minds scattered, not always focused. We feel anxiety. While saying something, we lose chain of thoughts and that track is lost. That happens because we are not centered. Any kind of breathing technique is like that string which pulls the kite back, which pulls the mind back into your control and management. So this is the first wellness hack which I will suggest to all of us here today. Many of us don't manage to get 7.5 hours to 8 hours of sleep a night. And the reasons can be many. It could be because of our life circumstances. It could be because of time management. It could be because of health issues, medication, many things. If that is the case for you, please try practicing Shavasana or Yoga Nidra. Before you fall asleep and after you have finished watching whatever you're watching, either on television or your mobiles, I hope you don't, but suppose that has been the last thing you do. Take 5 minutes time, or if 5 minutes are not possible, 3 minutes time, just 3 minutes. Lie down flat on the bed. Let your arms and legs be uncrossed. Starting with your toes, scan your body all the way to the top of your head, clenching and unclenching so that you can actually feel the muscles getting loose and relaxed. Having done this, mentally tell yourself, tomorrow's another day. I get another chance to do things right. That way, at mind, you're at peace, and then go to sleep. Even if you're managing just 4 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours at night, you will find the quality of that sleep is better. Your deep sleep component has been higher. Another technique, which again many of us familiar with VESLARC sessions will be aware of, is what we call alternate nostril breathing. When we do Anulom Vilom, for example, we find that it is a great help in calming our minds. So this is a very quick wellness hack. The next time you're anxious because of something, if you can just go away from where you are, let's say you're in the staff room or you're in a certain place, if you have that chance, that opportunity, please take just 1 or 2 minutes, go somewhere else and sit. But when you're sitting, make sure your feet are not on the ground, raise them high and sit cross-legged. When you do pranayams, please make sure you're not discharging the body's energies back to the earth. Sit cross-legged on something. So it could be on top of a chair, it could be on a mat, it could be on a dhari, it could be on anything. If that is not possible at the workplace, no problem, do it in your homes. But if we are not doing alternate nostril breathing, we're not giving ourselves something that's truly wonderful. So let's do it. Sitting has been called the new smoking, which means it is as bad or worse compared to smoking. So what should we be doing? Rising and walking every 45 minutes. Easy to do? No. Should we be doing it? Yes. Another point that you can see I've written is a footstool. In fact, right now, as I'm sitting and talking to you, my knees are elevated higher than the hips. Using a footstool takes away the pressure from the knees. So if we want to be able to, let's say, go on hikes, walks, treks, and climbs well into our 50s, 60s, maybe even older, please start now by keeping a footstool wherever you are, whether you're working from home, whether you're working in the institute, keep a footstool handy. Doesn't cost much, doesn't take much. If you don't have a footstool, some people say, can we use a box? And my answer is no. A proper footstool will have an inclined plane. So when you're wearing shoes, you can rest your feet on an angle. That is better than keeping it on top of a box. And on a daily basis, have at least 20 minutes where you're doing active self-care. Fourth thing, take care you filter what you put into the mind. On days when we are anxious and stressed, if we sit down and watch one dose of news on television, we're going to be more anxious and stressed. So instead, bring in laughter. Watch funny videos. I'm sure each person has a certain brand of humor. Somebody may find stand-up comedy as funny. Somebody else finds it funny to watch dog videos or baby videos or panda videos. You choose what you want to see. Make sure you laugh. The fifth thing, periodically we need to scan the body and see what is getting signaled. For example, someone was telling me recently, very recently, my stomach feels heavy all the time. I don't know what's wrong. I've been eating all the regular foods. Maybe I should go to a doctor and take digestive medicines. So I asked her a simple question. I asked her what time she has her meals, and that was fine. Then I asked her, are you hungry? Say at dinner, when you're having your dinner at 8. She said, mostly I am, sometimes I'm not. I said, when you're not hungry, have you tried to see, did you eat something different that day? She said, yeah, I've found sometimes when I'm eating non-vegetarian foods or if I'm eating something that's a little heavier in terms of oil or ghee, for example, I'm not that hungry in the evening. So I said, in that case, there's a very simple solution. There are two possible choices you have. One is to reduce the food that is making you feel heavy, which is sitting in your stomach for a long time, because clearly your body right now is not able to digest that well. The second is, if you still decide to eat that at lunch, you may want to see if once a week you want to skip your dinner and do a fast. So she looked at me and said, are you suggesting intermittent fasting? I said, no, I'm not suggesting anything of the kind. I'm just saying, listen to your body. When the whole family is sitting down at 8 and having dinner, and you're also shoving food into your mouth because that's what you do every day, you may not be listening that on a certain day the body is saying, I'm not so hungry. So I said, there's a third option also, eat lesser. If you're not so hungry, but you still feel you need to be there, she said, yeah, I have my in-laws and all that, otherwise he'll start questioning me and I'll have a lot of problem. I said, then eat lesser. Either at dinner eat lesser, or better still at lunch have a little lesser when you know a certain food does. In my case, I have seen, for if I'm sitting and working on the laptop computer for a while, chances are after a while my feet are not going to be in the right position, and when I get up, they may tend to cramp. So the cue for me is, once in a while I have to get up and walk, otherwise I'm not heeding the signal. Also with this, you will notice we have written labeling emotions. When we feel anxious or disappointed or stressed or maybe just bored, it's good to say in our minds, right now, this is what I'm feeling. Right now, I'm feeling bored. Right now, I'm feeling restless. Right now, I'm feeling this. Doing this periodically through the day is a self reminder that this is where I am. This is not who I am. Number one. Number two, it also reminds us where we need to be. So, labeling emotions is extremely useful. Sixth thing, very obvious, make sure you're hydrating yourself. Like right now, I will not reach out and show you. I do have, let me show you. Uh, so I'm sitting with this because I know that in case I want to sip, you have to have your water or your green tea or whatever it is that you want to use to hydrate yourself accessible and on hand. So if you sit at your desk, let's say you're correcting papers or you're creating some content for this coming academic year, make sure your water bottle is right next to you and it's visible. Don't keep it hidden away in the bag. A lot of people say, we carry the water, but then we forget about it. We carry our lunch dabbas, but forget to eat till 4 in the afternoon. Now that doesn't help. The next point with point 6 itself, what we've written is the food needs to be what we call as high prana food. And of course, we need to take care of the quantity and the timings. Now, what do we mean by high prana? If something comes in a packet and is ready to eat, it's dead food. Should we not eat it? If we want, we can. Many of us still enjoy our instant noodles, or we may like bread, or we may like cornflakes that come from a box, to each his own or to each her own. But we need to know it is dead food and not prana wala food. It's not pran rich food. So what should we do? Make sure that you're giving yourself enough of food which is actual food. The fruits which we eat, the sprouts we have, the daily vegetables we have, the dal, rice, roti which we are cooking and having. So simple test. How fast does food spoil? A fruit, for example, you buy it from the market. If you haven't consumed it for 4 days or 5 days, it's going to start spoiling terribly. And fruit flies, first you'll get to see fruit flies hovering over it. If fruit flies are there, that is food. Keep a packet of Maggi noodles or a packet of biscuit and see if you can attract fruit flies. You'll realize even tiny creatures are blessed with the intelligence to know what has pran. So some of us may be smiling or laughing when I say this, but this is a very easy test, especially if you have a child or children. And if they have a tendency to go for junk food, ask them to do this as a little experiment and see what do little insects like ants or fruit flies go towards to eat. And when you know that happens, that has pran. Now, please don't take this example beyond a point. A mother I shared this with came back and said, I bought a packet of 5-star chocolate and a cockroach came towards it. So my 5-year-old turned around and said, look, mama, the cockroach is there. So therefore there is pran. No, that's not what we're talking about. The last thing is, this is something very useful, but we forget to do it. Process the leftover emotions from whatever it is in life which causes us sadness, sometimes anger, sometimes any kind of negative emotion. The best way to do it is either to write, that is one of the great ways. The other thing is to simply talk to oneself or talk to the divine if you're a believer in divinity, if you're a theist and you believe in God. Another technique is through meditation. And there will be times when you find yourself releasing a lot of tears and you're wondering why that is happening. You're actually processing emotions which you have been carrying within you. And you're going to find that the act of writing, the act of praying, the act of talking to yourself, the act of meditating, these can help you release the emotions. Some people say that they like to do this by talking to people, which is fine. If you have a good friend or a few good friends, you're truly blessed, go ahead and share with them. But it's important we take care of this aspect. I'll just give everybody a few moments to take a good look at this particular slide and ask yourself, out of all the things shared here, which one thing do you want to implement in case you're not already implementing it? So that is a reflection question for us. Which is the wellness hack that we can use right away? I'll just take us back to the previous slide. I will strongly suggest choose one thing. Do not choose too many. You can keep the others on a wish list that maybe in future I'll try and bring these into my life. Because even one thing, when it is done properly, can really transform our lives. And one good thing pulls others. Many of us must have experienced this. Sattva pulls sattva. And the moment we start one sattvic habit, that brings into place other things. And with this, we now move ahead. Since today's International Yogasana Day, I'm just going to show us on the slide a few pictures. You don't have to practice this at all. But if you, like me, find yourself strapped for time on a regular basis, yet you want to take care of your bodies, please try one or more of these planks. So in previous yoga days, which we have done in person, some of us will be familiar with the first one, also known as Chaturanga Dandasana. Incidentally, every single plank, which today the Western world knows as a plank, does have its roots in yogasana. And I'm saying this on the basis of very limited knowledge that I have of yogasana. So this one, which is also called the tabletop pose, is one of the best planks when it comes to engaging several core muscles of the body. Now, why am I suddenly talking about planks here? It's not just because today is International Yoga Day. It is because if you have 5 minutes or 6 minutes only to do something for your body on a regular basis, I hope you don't. I hope you have more time, but suppose you do, try planks. Even if you do a plank for just 30 seconds or 20 seconds for starters, and you don't even repeat, but you're consistent, you're going to find your core strength is definitely increasing. You will find your stamina is increasing. You'll find you're able to deal with a tougher day in a much better manner. The second is one of my favorite asanas in the last 2 years, 2.5 years of the pandemic. I learned this. It's called the dolphin pose. Now, please note, this is not the downward dog. A lot of us know what is called as Adho Mukha Svanasana. That is the downward dog. That is also a plank, by the way. But this one is a variation which is called the dolphin pose, where, as you can see, the forearms are resting on the ground. So this is to be done by people who have already mastered the downward dog, because this is one level higher than the downward dog when it comes to your body's flexibility. A beautiful pose, and any pose that needs you to get your heart at a lower level is going to pay off very richly in terms of benefits. This one, again in the Western world, is called a plank, but in asanas we call this Setu Bandhasana, also known as a bridge pose. I think some of our staff members from Tulsi Technical Institute will remember we have done Prangan Prayas sessions and we have celebrated International Women's Day with Yogasana, where this particular asana has been taught. A fabulous asana when it comes to metabolism, our gynecological health for women, digestive health for men and women both, and spinal strength. The side plank, and this is the easy version. You can also do different versions of this. You can raise your hands, you can move one leg to the back to support, you can move one leg in the air, so on and so forth. Young people sometimes struggle with this asana because this doesn't call for only stamina, it calls for core strength. Add it to your repertoire and you'll be pleasantly surprised to find you don't need to go to the gym to build your 6 packs or 4 packs or whatever packs you want. You will actually have very strong crisscross muscles of the abdomens by doing the side plank. This is again a very beautiful plank in case you have any issues with your hand. Like I have had carpal tunnel syndrome for a long time, so I have to be very careful while doing this, but it's a fabulous asana when it comes to, again, increasing your core strength. And this one is the opposite. You will realize in yogasana there are many planks which are there as opposites, many asanas which are there as opposites, in the sense if there's a forward bend, there's a backward bend. If there's a pushing to the front, there is a leaning to the back. The idea is that every muscle group needs to be worked and internal organs get massaged beautifully from all sides. So this one, for example, is called Purva Tanvasana. Purva in this case, Purv means east and Tan is body. So east facing body means nothing but the body looking upwards, whereas this is the downward one. Now this looks similar to this, but the two are very different. Here your back is completely straight, whereas here you're at an angle. And the entire arm is used, unlike balancing on your forearms here. So in case this is confusing, then just pick 2 things to do. If it is not consuming, if you're looking at this and saying, what Piyam is saying is something we already know, then good for you. Please keep at it. There are many more. But for our purposes, I'm again going to remind you have 5 minutes time. Take 30 seconds for each of these 6. That is still just going to be 3 minutes. Rest in between. You will use 5 minutes to do 6 kinds of planks. And trust me when I say, you are going to find within 7 to 10 days of practice, your core strength starts to change. The way you use your abdominal muscles and your lower back muscles will begin to change. You will feel much more comfortable. Any activity you do, let's say you're a lady and let's say there is a kitchen task that involves you to sit down on the floor, squat, take out a heavy utensil or your mixer grinder or whatever and stand up with it, you'll find it's getting easier. So when people say, oh, I'm growing old, so my fat is increasing, my bones are creaking, this is happening, that is happening. Yes, that's true. That's one part of the aging process. But can you hold that back? Yes. Can you reverse it? Yes. Please note the objective is not about reversing it. It's just to stay healthy. It's to stay fine and happy. Now let's come to the next aspect of taking care of ourselves, which is this circle. Many of us get anxious because of things not in our hands. A lady came to me once, about 2-3 months back, asking for help for her daughter because her daughter seemed to be very confused about what to do in terms of higher studies and career. And she said, my daughter is brilliant. If she wants, she can go to the best of universities in the world, but I just don't know how to push her, how to guide her. I told her after a point, now the daughter is around 21, 22 years of age. I said, after a point, our job is not to be pushing them, because if you are, A, you're taking away from her skills and she'll not get to make the mistakes maybe that she needs to make in order to learn. B, you're creating stress for yourself and stress for her because she's going to hate it. She will always feel my mother is imposing on me. And when I spoke to the girl, that was indeed what had been happening. The girl had already started filtering what she would share with the mother because she knew the mother is going to jump in and say, do it this way, do it that way, talk to this person this way. Now we need to know the only person we can really control is ourselves. If we can focus only on this, there is no stress. Why does stress happen in all our lives? Because we are focusing on other people, our colleagues, our families, the place where we work, the career progress we make. This is, of course, a corporate slide. You can see I've mentioned the source here. But the same is true of our families as well. When we try to change someone else's behavior and we see that we can't, that is where the stress happens. If we can only remind ourselves that the only person we control is ourselves, in fact, that itself is a Herculean task. Managing our minds, doing traffic regulation for our thoughts, managing our breathing. This itself is a major victory. That is why Swami Vivekananda had said, Swarat Samrat Bhavati. Swarat, one who rules over himself or herself. Samrat, emperor, Bhavati, will be. One who can conquer himself or herself, one who can rule over, regulate, master himself or herself is emperor. Now think about that for a moment. Imagine if you could just breathe deep and say, okay, it's all right if my spouse or my child or children or my in-laws or my colleagues or the principal of the institute where I work say certain things or do certain things. I can influence their thinking and behavior by telling them my thoughts, but I don't control and I don't need to control. Imagine how liberated you would feel. And imagine how well you would then be able to use your creativity to do things which really matter and to do things which make a difference. And then, of course, stress can also happen because of this. Nothing better than the last 2 years to teach us how it can come from outside sources. For this, the best thing is prayer and to ask what is in my hands. Think of 2020. Think of all the kadhas that you made, all the haldi with water and haldi with milk that you had. And if the person of 2022, the you of 2022 could give advice to the person of 2020, chances are you would say, hey, it's okay, don't worry. Don't worry too much. Use your masks, use your sanitizers, but don't go overboard with sanitizers. Don't sit up at night thinking what will happen. And yes, there is a challenge that is there right now and will continue for a while, but you'll be able to manage it. Think of how it changes the way in which we perceive stress. So this is the fourth suggestion in this segment of fundamental self-care. On a regular basis, remind yourself, the only person we control is ourselves. We can influence others, but we don't control them. So let's put in our best and then allow Newton's third law of motion to take care of things. Remember, to an action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So sooner or later, the actions that we put in for others will bear fruit. But in the meantime, we learn to be patient. We learn how not to get anxious. We learn how not to get stressed. And we learn not to feel guilty when things don't go well in our lives and we're thinking, am I responsible? Maybe a little bit, but not entirely. So it's okay. This is something we've talked about, but I'm reiterating. We need to ask ourselves, are we giving ourselves a few moments of me time every day? It could be something as simple as just having a cup of tea or coffee by yourself in the evening. It could be sitting down to pray for 5 minutes. Guilt-free way, recharge yourself. If you need your quiet time, say so. It's all right to tell it to our families. It's all right to tell it to our colleagues and even to our students at times. There have been times when I get inundated with requests from former students who have maybe had a workshop or something and then they want to have a Zoom call or they want to come and meet. And earlier I would feel tremendously guilty if I had to say no to anybody because I thought, no, as an educationist, it's my duty to take care of what somebody has as a problem or a question that they want to ask. And then I realized that if I don't have that me time, that space in my head, how am I going to be effective in helping someone else? A tired, stressed out, frazzled, irritable person does not make for a good teacher and trainer. So we need to find our bandwidth without guilt. So the final suggestion, therefore, is the next slide where I show us 7 kinds of rest. 7 kinds. The first is physical, in which passive physical rest is all about sleep, which we do on a daily basis. But there's also active physical rest when you're, let's say, doing shavasana, yoga nidra. Jains follow a technique called kayotsarga. Kaya is body, utsarga is to offer. All these are active ways in which you get physical rest, meaning you're not asleep, you're not lost to the world, but you're resting the body and mind and allowing the mind and body to beautifully rejuvenate. The second is mental rest. Sitting by a window somewhere and just allowing your mind to graze. You will have some song playing in your head, maybe from something you heard yesterday. Random thoughts chasing each other. Mental rest. Third, sensory rest. When we are forever using all our 5 senses, watching things, eating things, touching things, doing things, smelling things, that's sensory. Taking a break, in fact, this comes in also as pratyahara. Those of us who are familiar with Patanjali's Eightfold Path, the Yoga Sutras will know we withdraw our senses, that is sensory rest. Fourth, creative rest. There are times we'll be creative and there are times we need to put the off button and not always ask ourselves, okay, what's the solution? What's the solution to a problem? It's okay to take a break. Fifth, this is very important for all of us, especially in India, because most of us as Indians are not very good at saying no to people. We don't want to be seen as bad people. Emotional rest. Let's say that you have a friend who has a lot of dramabazi in life. Or let's say you have a colleague who always uses you to vent. And you don't do the same, so it's not reciprocal. It is all right to step away and say, can we have this conversation later? Right now, I'm not in the right frame of circumstances. You don't even have to say right frame of body and mind. That's emotional rest. Sixth, social rest. Some of us after the pandemic were so happy to get back to offline interactions that we swung to the other extreme. Vacations were happening in a crazy manner. meeting with friends and reunions. It's like a pendulum. It had gone to one extreme of complete isolation and then it swung to the other extreme. Social rest means stepping away, telling yourself that maybe one day in a week, I'm not going to be taking calls, not be responding to WhatsApps, especially those silly WhatsApp messages, the jokes, the forwards, etc. Social rest. The last one is, although categorized in this, but technically it works in the opposite ways. It doesn't mean going away from something, it means going towards something, spiritual nourishment. Now, if you're a theist, this is easy. Praying, mantra jap, meditation, doing something like Ahangra meditation, Ahangra Upasana, where we see the divinity as us on our bodies. We are able to superimpose every aspect of our lives, our minds, our bodies, our breathing, every function of the body is seen as divine. That's spiritual rest. If we are not a believer in the divine, no problem. We can still see our bodies and minds and we can see the universe. And we know that there is a law in the universe, whether we call it a superpower or a consciousness, an order which holds everything in place. Are we able to tap into that? One of the nicest and best ways to do so is to spend time in nature. Now again, we'll say, man is talking as if we are not Mumbaikars. As people living in Mumbai, it may be difficult for all of us to walk to a park or to walk to the hills or to walk to the beach or the seashore. Can we find a little square of the sky and a tree to gaze at? Can we grow a little pot of tulsi or pudina or lemongrass or whatever in our little windowsill, even if we don't have a balcony? The point is, nature can be welcomed even in small ways into our lives. Spiritual nourishment stands for each and every such thing which allows us to replenish ourselves by connecting with the divine. So on this note, we move to just two concluding thoughts very quickly. Take a look at this picture. As you can see, there is a little gate and there are two doorkeepers painted on the gate. And you know that in many rich people's homes, you will have what we call a security. They are nothing but doorkeepers. In the old days, kings had doorkeepers. They were called the dwarpal. Dwar means the door. Dwarpal is the doorkeeper. And what was their job? Their job was to make sure that whoever is going in should be somebody who will be useful and helpful and beneficial for the king, let's say. And if somebody is an enemy, either the person is not allowed to enter or the person is tied up and bound up and then taken in. So let's say if a thief wants to enter or a spy of another kingdom wants to come and enter, the doorkeeper's job is to be alert and spot such a person. And if you have that suspicion, to spot that, tie the person up and only then allow entry or to not allow entry at all. My suggestion to all of us today is, let us try and cultivate good doorkeepers for our minds. The next time you have a thought in the mind which doesn't help, a thought about something uncharitable, maybe about somebody, maybe we are being judgmental or harsh or critical of someone, or maybe we are being harsh on ourselves. Can we have a doorkeeper that says, okay, not a necessary thought. Next time I'll be more alert, and when this thought pops up, I'll try and stop it at the door of my mind itself. I won't allow it to take root in the mind. I'll share with you an example as to how I found this concept very useful and why I'm sharing it therefore today with everyone. During the pandemic, and I've said this before, I found my electronic screen time had gone up. This was in the first few months. And I realized I was using maybe Netflix as a sort of escapism tool. And then I saw what was actually happening when we went through this phase of working online, taking care of the household chores. And I would be very tired at the end of the day. My mind would say, now I think I deserve to watch 1 hour of Netflix. Now that's a thought. Does it help me? The answer is no. What I needed was sleep, longer hours of sleep. But because for some weeks I was not so alert, I allowed the thought to come into the mind, and then it looks like a very legitimate thought. Once that intruder or thief has entered the kingdoms, the city gates, he or she will mix and mingle with the others and come across as a regular citizen. Then the king is in danger. So what do? We stop that thing at the gate itself. So I started training myself to be a little more alert as to when does a thought come up. And I would find when I'm doing something tedious, boring, or tiring, at that time the mind tells itself, okay, let's finish this. And at the end of the day, this is going to be like a reward, like a lollipop for a child. If the child goes, well, I don't want to do this. And the mind says, no, no, you're going to get that at the end. And now what does the doorkeeper do? The doorkeeper looks at that thought and says, nice try. But then that's not good enough. What do we need to do also? Find substitutes, find healthy substitutes. I've shared with others and I repeat again today. For me, what worked were books. For others, different people may work. For someone else, it could be prayers, it could be meditation, it could be chatting to someone, it could be listening to music. It could simply be sitting in silence. Or it could be 10 minutes of scrolling Instagram, but please keep 10 minutes as only 10. Be alert and come out of whatever it was that is not going to serve you well. Because the moment we allow unhelpful thoughts to come into the mind, we have already created trouble for ourselves in the future, because those thoughts now begin to look very legitimate. So there has to be alertness on a regular basis as to what is it I allow into the head. And thoughts are very fast. They come in a split second. So we also learn to move the intellect fast, because the intellect rules over the thoughts. So we call it buddhi versus manas. In the mind, thoughts come and go, more than 6,000 a day. But the intellect gets to decide, and the intellect is stronger, powerful, quicker. So we know we can have very good doorkeepers employed to make sure our minds get good things. The last thing, one of my favorite quotations, this is from Nietzsche, and this was quoted by Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. What this means is, whatever be our circumstances, no matter how tough, how difficult, how challenging, if we have a good reason for doing what we're doing, we can put up with the challenges with a smile. And they'll not affect us too much. They'll not stress us out too much. They'll not spoil our bodies and minds and leave us feeling scarred. We'll be able to walk through life more or less in a happy way. When I say happy, I don't mean this happy, smiling all the time, but having equilibrium, having a sense of peace within, that it's okay, the tough times also pass. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is a tiny, tiny exercise. In fact, let me just remind you to practice this. And let me just thank you on behalf of the entire VESLARC team. I'll come out of the slideshow mode, and we're going to do a very tiny exercise. What you should do is close your eyes for a few seconds. Ask yourself, who are the people dear to you in your life? I'll ask you to open your eyes. I'm sure many of you would have seen the faces of your families. And if that is the case, great. Some of you may have also seen your extended families, your friends, relatives, your workplace colleagues, different people. Please remember that if you take care of yourself, if each one of us takes care of himself or herself, we actually do better justice for all these people in our lives. So if we want to be, let's say, a better parent, a better teacher, a better spouse, a better child, a better son or daughter, we first have to take care of ourselves. So if we are sure of the why, we will take care of the how, and we can deal with different kinds of circumstances. So this is our final message to you, therefore, today from VESLARC. And at this point, we conclude the session. Thank you so, so much for your patience. If you have any questions to ask, please feel free to either unmute and speak or to use the chat box and share your query. Anushka would request you to stop the recording at this point.